welcome to my studio. Today we're working on our red aspen trees in fall. This is a really fun class. We're going to talk about lots of layers and textures that are done with the wax that I haven't done with any of the other trees. This has been the most requested class, so I really hope you enjoy it. Let's get started and have fun. If you've never taken a Miriam Joy class, I fill my class in sections, and like I would teach you in a regular class, so that you don't have to watch the whole video and then try to figure out where you start. So after a section, I'll stop and then have you do that part, and we're going to continue on. I wanted to talk about our supply list. It's always a good thing to do, and sometimes I don't remember to add a supply list, so we're going to talk about that. You need a big enough gourd. I like the vase gourds that you can put your pattern onto. You can use a pattern, or you simply can use it as a reference. We will make sure that's included in your class. A gourd shard to practice on is always a great thing to start out with. I'm also going to be using a silicone mat. We do have those at Miriam Joy to help hold the gourd, because I'm not going to cut it. If you want to cut yours into a vase, you can, but it just keeps it from being so slippery. And I also like to put this design on a slice of wood. That's totally up to you. If yours doesn't stand, this one actually stands on its own very nice, so that's a good thing. We're going to be using acrylic paint. I just picked out a medium and a light blue. It doesn't matter what colors they are, just something that you have or something that you can pick up. Don't worry about it being a certain color that's not, or if you don't have a choice, just get a blue and then add some white to it, and you'll have that. Any brand of acrylic paint. I am always asked that question, and I don't care. Just any kind that you want to use. We're going to use that for our background so that our tree will stand out. Otherwise, it gets lost in the gourd itself. So that's the reason that we're doing that. We're going to be using some sea sponges to put that blue on. So anywhere that you can pick up a sea sponge, if you don't have one, plate to put our acrylic paints on to sponge it. We'll talk about a certain way to sponge. Water holder, doesn't have to be a brush holder. We're melting pots. If you have melting pots, I probably used at least 2. We're going to be using what we have now, which is the wax melter, which is our new thing. It's kind of like having 10 melting pots all at one time, so you're saving all that money buying the individual melting pots, and you have it right here at your convenience. We're going to try using probably the number 1 or the number 2, or excuse me, number 1 or number 0 tool. That would be those 2. And there's one even smaller and one bigger. So probably the number 0, like I said, or the number 1, the smaller end. Which ones you're comfortable with. Some people make bigger ones and some people make smaller ones. Everybody's is different. We're going to be using the Miriam Joy wax liner, as well as the texture brush and insert. If you have 2, it's easier to do that. If you don't, that's fine. We'll just start with the yellow color and work to the orange color from there. We're going to be using Crayola crayons. We're going to be using red, orange, dandelion if you still have it. If not, you can mix some of the colors up to get similar to a dandelion. Green, brown, yellow, green, and gray. So those will be our crayons that we're going to use. And a pencil, of course, to help you with yours. And if you want to use a white chocolate pencil to help draw on your pencils, or your trees, you can do that as well. I use a wire in case my liner gets clogged. You can help unclog that, just a piece of any type of wire you have. Q-tips, cotton balls, paper towels, and of course my famous tray. I always have to have the tray working as well. And I'd like to kind of set that to the side. We'll see how that comes in there. And we will talk about heat gun maybe to kind of make your lines a little bit wider. But that is all of our basic supplies besides our hobby knife with the scooped shovel. And that's real important because that gets your parts off that you want off and you don't end up scraping your gourd. So let's get our supplies all together and we'll get started. So you want to think about how wide the trees are going to be on the gourd and then how high. I'm going to wet my sponge and wring all the water out of it so that there's no more water in it. It's just, otherwise your paint starts to water down. But to get a really nice sponging, there is a clue to that. And the clue is that you take your paint and you don't dip into it. You pull it away and then you pounce into this part over here. And you should be able to see through it. You shouldn't have a solid color. And once you get the paint amount off that you like, then go ahead and start working on your gourd. Now we're going to be a little bit higher up in this middle part here, and we're going to taper down, and our tree are going to go out to the side. I like this color. It's kind of almost a cobalt blue, and we're going to go all the way down, even almost to where our grass would be. But you want to kind of work so that it's spreading out on the edges. It's not solid color on the edges. And when we're working in the middle, we're going to turn our sponge in different directions so we don't get the same pattern over and over again. And we're just going to do that as much or as little as you want. We've got another layer, so don't worry about if you're afraid that you don't have enough on. It's easier to put more on than to put less on. So I think I've got that about where I want it. I want to kind of look and see how wide my pattern for my side trees are a little bit wider and a little bit on this side so that we make sure we can get all the fullness we want. That's a little bit watery there. That's what it would look like if you left the water in your paint. Okay, go ahead and get the blue on and we'll come back and you can see how little. I only did it one time, so just a little bit of paint. We don't need a whole lot at all. Okay, now that we've got our blue on, let's get our light blue on. We're going to do it the same way. Load it, pounce it, and we're going to apply that again. I'm not going to kind of go all the way. I'm going to let the blue, darker blue, go more of the outside direction than my lighter blue. I like to do backgrounds of my trees. If you notice, I've got a new tree book that's going to be coming out. I usually put some type of background, and I talk about all the different kinds of backgrounds and textures and stuff that I use with trees. A lot of times I will use a pumpkin color. That's kind of like my go-to one. You also can float color around the tree to make it pop and stand out. Otherwise it kind of gets lost into the gourd and you don't want to do that. Alright, so go ahead and put your light blue on and let's get started. What we're going to do, the first thing is after we've got our paints on, they're still damp a little bit. I'm going to take a sponge brush and wet it. And what I'm going to do is go up the center, and this is taking the blue paint off for our first tree because it will help keep the white whiter in our bark or tree base or branches or whatever you want to call that. So we want to just remove that. We don't want it, I've got it off center just a little bit, but that's okay. We can keep going and just make it adjusted from there, or you could go back and sponge over some of that a little bit if you wanted to. This is being an aspen, their branches are not really, or their trunks are not really wide, they're more narrow. Actually, we have some of the oldest ones here in Prescott, some of the biggest ones that you will see. So if you do happen to remove too much of that color, just come back like you did before and just adjust to it and color that back in. With our paints, and then we're going to give those just a couple minutes to dry. The next thing we're going to do is color our tree center and then also our little guys. I am using an oil pencil, and oil pencils used to be found at Walnut Hollow. I know they didn't carry them. I'm not sure if there's any more out there. What I would suggest is taking a piece of gourd to your local craft store and trying out their colored pencils. I know that Hobby Lobby especially, you can do that. You can go to, and they sell them individually. So on a project like this where you only needed certain colors, it would be a really good deal instead of buying the whole pack of ones. And the softer they are, the better they color onto your gourd. So that's something to think about. I did try my regular just colored pencils that I had. Give them another shot here and kind of see what happens. Sometimes by heating them up, like with a Bic lighter, you can use them. That's not doing too bad. You can see the difference, but it's working. And then after you did in one layer, you could go back over it with another layer. So those are kind of some of your options. If you don't even want to do that, paint it on with acrylic paint. I would just blend it off and not do it totally solid, because all of your branches are not seen through the leaves. That's something that we want to kind of remember. So that gives you some different options to think about as you're working on your tree. And I am going to go ahead and do my big tree. So we've got this big guy all done here, and I want to do 2 smaller ones, or 2 or 3 on one side and 2 on the other side. It doesn't matter how many you think they should have. We're just going to get those in. These are smaller. They're way behind, or they're smaller in growth, or you can even stagger their how far apart they are. I'm going to bring that one only up to about that tall. And then I'm going to jump to the other side. Oops. I can get my gum eraser and erase that guy. We'll just cover him up. We'll just pretend he's part of the thing. I'm going to do... I have more room for 3 on my other side. I do. I'm going to do one more over here. And I'm going to take him up just a little bit taller. For some reason my tip is jumping around here. And then I'm going to do 2 on this side. Well, let's make this guy little. They should not be even. Trees are not even. I probably shouldn't even have them spaced as evenly as I do. That's just the OCD in me, I guess, coming out. So we're going to get him. Now we want to kind of go back, and you can look at your pattern. And we're going to start doing branches. And however big, little, small, short, fat you think they need to be, where they're coming out from, in front, behind, on top. We need, like, you know, think about some that would be coming out on top of our thing as well. We're just going to put a few of these in, because not a lot of this is going to show, and we're not going to worry about being a lot, but we do want some, if you kind of saw through it, that they would show up. So kind of think about things like that. This one, we'll bring him over a ways. I can bring a smaller one in here. And just do some here and there. Again, don't make them even. We're going to define them with our wax liner. That's really when we're going to set that in, so they don't have to worry about getting it all on now. This would be cool to do as a winter one. Just do it the snow. That's what I see right now. It's kind of the winter type thing. Alright, go ahead and get yours done. And I want you to plug in your melting pot or your melt waxer, and we'll be using that in a while, and we'll give it a chance to warm up. So when we're working on trees, we also want to think about shadowing and where the shade would be coming from. And so I'm going to think about my sun source being right here. And sometimes they even draw it on or put a sticky on. So you think about where your shadows would be. So our light part would be on this side. So our shadow part would be on that side. So I'm going to come in with gray. And we're going to do some shading on our left side of the trunk. And this also helps give it a rounded look as well. You could do just a little bit on the other side to even make it more rounded if you felt it needed to be. Now, like that guy would be behind, so he would be just a little bit. If they were on top, they wouldn't be shaded, but if they're behind, they would be. So we're just going to do just a tad on our tiny ones. Not that much at all. Don't make it hard. This is just a real fast thing we're doing here. And don't overthink it. Just add that darker shade here and there. Now you don't want to take up too much. You don't want to lose your white. So a third, a fourth, third at the most. So go ahead and get that done. The first thing we're going to do is put on our lines with our brown crayon. So we want to pick the color brown out. You can find it in all these in the box of 24, except for the dandelion. And we're just going to cut him out. Now, if you're using the regular low tint melting pots, you know how to load those. If not, we'll put a video up for you so that you can see that. And you're just going to load it like you normally would using, I think, a third of the crayon. But on our melt waxer, we're going to use the whole crayon. Now, this is good and bad, and for a couple of reasons. We're going to use a whole can instead of just part of it, but it's going to last you a longer than if you had put it in the regular low temp melting pot. So that is the reason that we do that. We also want to start warming up our wax liner, and I use this one closest to the handle when I'm using my tools and stuff, so that it doesn't lean the pot out. There's nowhere for it to go because the handle's in the way and it does not fall. But we want to have all of that melt really, really well. We can kind of show you there. We've still got lumps and bumps and everything in that. So we want to get that more of that type of consistency. That wax has separated, and we will stir that before we would use that color. But if you're not want to use that color, you can take it and pull it out with your paper towel and let it cool and go to other colors. If you don't want to do anything, you can just leave it there and just keep on working. That is totally up to you. So let's get that warmed up really, really well with our wax liner, and we will start lining our trees. All of our brown wax is melted, and if we can kind of bring it in and show you, we're going to kind of scoop this up like a shovel, and you'll see that it's full all the way to the top. And when you're at that point, we're going to start to line. I am going to wipe him off real quick. And what that usually does is get that big gob off first and then go straight to our tree from there. Our new wax melters actually have taller tins than mine do, and the tools stay in even better. So that's something to know, and it even gives you more room if you wanted to use more wax, but I don't really think we would want to use more wax than the amount that we need. So I'm going to have this guy ready to go here, and see if I can do this, and scoop it up, wrong direction. You want him nice and warm. I'm going to come and wipe him off here, and then we're going to start outlining our tree. Now this doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, on trees, it's better if they're not perfect, because if you look at all the branches and all the little squiggles and everything coming out on them, and if it starts to run out, it should go quite a long ways. You'd really be surprised how long it really goes. And like I said, this is not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to look like a tree, and I've really noticed the more I have done trees, the more that you kind of goober them up, the better they look. So think about just letting it kind of flow. Some are going to go behind and some are going to go in front, and we're just starting with our outline here. So I am going to go ahead, line these on this side. Make sure you take some from in the middle as well. We're needed some of those. Some in front, some behind. And that one's going to be behind. And this guy is going to be in front. You have little guys coming out of him. A lot of this is going to get covered up, but some of it will show through. So, and make some go around here, like kind of like that. So I'm going to finish up. We'll do some little trees, and then we'll do the middle part. Okay, so we're just going to, on these little guys, just run up them and just go at those little sides like we drew them on. You can bring us some of those into the middle, some of those behind. And just go ahead and outline all of the little trees and branches. We're going to come in on our smaller trees and add these smaller lines, as well as some of the lines just on the trunk of the tree. Not too many, just enough. Kind of play with what is already there. if you think it needs it or not. And then we're just going to come in and add some thinner branches here, there, and everywhere. Have them come off of different things. You can even do that guy if you feel you want to at this time. And so I have some little areas right there where I might think they needed a little bit more. And you can see how long the wax liner is going, and those are at miriamjoy.com. If you notice that your wax liner happens to plug up on you for some reason, there may be a thing of cold wax sitting in it. Take your wire, any piece of random wire, and just kind of go through it, run it through the whole thing, especially the tip. Make sure it's a piece that can fit all the way through the tip. And I let mine sit there too long, so we're going to pop that one off while that dries though. And talked, and that's one of the big no-nos when you're working with wax, is don't sit there and talk. And you can see that my wax has gotten warmer, so it's actually making bigger lines. So that may be something you like or you don't like, or whatever you feel you should work with that. So we're going to come over after that, and we're going to do this guy here. And I'm sitting here talking again, as I should not be. I want to start with our heart at the bottom. This is a real nice thing to do for anniversaries or loved ones or different things like that. So think about whose initials you may want to put on it, or different things. And we're going to make that heart first. And if you have the initials for an anniversary date or a wedding date, I'm going to do I love you. Just to do something different on this one. And I'm going to give it a heart here, or a arrow I should say. And it didn't line up too perfectly, but it's not supposed to be perfect, because if you were kids doing it, or it would look that way anyway. So right now I want to put a couple of branches in the middle of our tree that would be coming out from the middle. And I want maybe one more just up here, and I'm not sure how much that would show up. And you can take them off. It doesn't have to be on. And then we're going to start working on our they look like eyes in your aspen trees. Kind of birch do kind of almost the same thing. So we're going to be doing like an eye, kind of on one side and the other side, and then back and forth, however you think that should go. Now, I actually see some natural lines in the gourd right here, and I like those, so I'm just going to follow through with those and do whatever I kind of feel that may need. But there's a lot of liner work, I don't know what else to kind of call it, that is done on these trees. They have a lot of these little lines and a lot of these little eyes naturally. So we want to make sure that we've added enough of those. And put one in the middle, kind of go on the either side of that. If you want another one on it, do it there. And just kind of keep on keeping on with it. Now, of course, when you come up here, you don't want to do as many where your branches are, or maybe we'd have liked to leave those branches off and done more eyes. That's up to you, however you feel. Now this one takes off from the inside of this, so we want to get that guy lined really well, and I need to stop and reload because my lines are getting little. It's something you can think about. If you're doing wider ones at the bottom, you may want it warmer. And then if you want more narrow ones at the top, you can do it thinner. So And I would have probably liked more eyes in this than I did. So let's go back and add a couple. And they're not just on the sides. They can be right in the middle. Don't think about just being there. They can be at different places. So if you have any other spots on the other trees that you haven't finished or done yet, and I need to go back and do my smaller branches on that guy. So finish up the base and let's go back and do the smaller branches. While we're finishing up with our brown, we're going to go ahead and do some gray. If you don't want the gray, don't add it. That's totally up to you. It just kind of, we're giving that shadow again. We're going to be doing that on the left side. Kind of like we're doing the brown, only it's going to be the gray. So I'm going to put that whole crayon in there. And while that is melting, we're going to just go ahead and do our little branches on our big guy now. I've got him so melted. We'll take that off with our hobby knife, and that's a good thing to show because we've got that down at the bottom. What you can do, if you don't want the big one, you can take it and rub it on your paper for a little bit until it starts to run down a little bit and starts to get the finer. You also, if you think it's getting too warm, can unplug it and it won't be as warm, but be real careful. Doesn't take much to turn that off. Don't forget we've got these guys on the side here. We want some branches off of them. And I'm just going to go ahead, finish that up, but before we go on to our next color, let's pop some of these guys off. Honestly, I would leave that if it was me, but if it bugs you, it's better to know how to get it off. Go under the fat part first, and using that middle part of your hobby knife, we're just going to knock it off. And see, I actually like that fat part in that one, but just so you can see how to remove a line if you didn't like it there. But this is not supposed to be perfect. This is trees, and trees are supposed to be fun and flowing and just do their own thing. To change our color in our liner, we're going to dump out as much of that wax as we can while it's still warm, and we're going to use our Q-tip. Sometimes you have to even do the Q-tip a little bit to even get it in there, but these were pretty tight, so it just fit in there real nice. And this is what I was talking about on the wire. If you have it stuck, just take a piece of wire and work that right out. And hopefully that'll get rid of most of our color. Sometimes when you're switching colors like that, it will pick up that color just a little bit. Let's see if our gray is melted all the way here. It looks like that. And I always start here, so if there's any brown, that brown go ahead and comes out. And you can see that really melted fast, so that's good. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to come in and we're just going to do on our shadow side some more little lines just to darken this up, get a bit more of that side of the shadow feel. I shouldn't have run that through my branch, but we'll be covering him up anyway. So don't put any on the right unless you want to. Do your own thing. This should have been more thin as we got up here, but we're going to be covering that up, so I'm not going to worry about that. If you want any gray on these other ones, you can put a little bit of gray on there as well. So just remember, with the wax melter, all of this unit is hot. Be careful about getting crayons next to it. If you want to leave the colors in there, you can. If you don't want to, Be very, very careful. It's hot. Probably your silicone pad would be the best thing to pull them out and sit them on, and then they can start to cool while you go on to your next color. So that is just one of the tips. I need to get me a smaller piece of silicone and then just cut that and then just lift those in and out and have the bigger piece for them to sit on. Or if you don't care, just keep on working and leave them in there and they'll stay warm. Just be careful. And I'm having to learn to train myself all over again because I'm used to the melting pots and I go to touch it and don't think about it. So go ahead and finish up your liner work, and we're going to talk about if we're going to heat these lines or not. I do have some gray on this side. I may go back and put a little bit more, but by heating this up with an embossing gun, what it does is kind of takes the lines and kind of melts them in and makes them more natural looking, but also expands them a bit. But you've got to be really, really careful and not overdo it. There's a fine line between doing it right and doing too much. So I will show you that. I do want to put a couple more gray lines on the other side though. I think that really does help. If you can clean off your wax liner when you're done with it, that helps you go to the next corner, color next time. So that is something to think about, cleaning that instead of just letting it sit there. And I'm just going to do just a few, not as long, just shorter ones here and there, just to make that tree a little bit more rounded as we talked about. And okay, give me a second, do that, and then we're going to clean out your lining tool real good so you'll have it ready for next time, and we're going to heat that up and show you what it looks like melted. So this is a embossing tool. This is in your scrapbook section. The difference between the heat gun and it is a lot more temperature. It's a lot hotter. Heat gun is a lot hotter, so we want to really use an embossing gun. And it also covers up this tip, which can be very, very hot. My first one didn't have it, and I would burn myself in circles, which doesn't look too good. So make sure you have one that's that good and nice and covered. So we're just going to heat these, like I said. I'm going to start at my top and work my way down until they just start to kind of turn. You'll notice liquidy, and then we're going to keep it moving. You see that point right there? You just want to get right there and stop. You don't want, I actually did the top probably a little bit too much. This is something you don't have to do if you don't want to do it. But it just kind of widens all those strokes. I got my middle too warm. That's okay. Those are just bigger branches. We're going to cover them up anyway. I just want to set that off just a little in the middle. This is just perfect how you would want it. The sky don't have. You've got to be careful when you're doing the surrounding areas because you're heating up your gourd and it's warming other things, not just what you're working on. So see how that just kind of takes it a different level. Be very careful when you do it the first time. It is a little bit tricky, I know. Less is better in the beginning until you kind of get the hang of it. And like I said, that little part right there, I'm going to cover up with trees anyway. It looks like fatter branches, so that's no big deal. Go ahead and do that if you want to, if you don't want to. And we're going to start our texture on our trees and grass. We're going to talk about the texture brush and insert. And this is a Miriam Joy product. We actually make these ourselves. If you have the old style melting pot, you can simply put that right inside and just work on top of it. and we do have a video to show you that. But with our new wax melter, we have to do it a little bit differently. Now there is the old style fashion melting pots, and you could put your crayon just right on there and just do it straight out of there if you weren't comfortable with doing it the way we're doing it. So know that you can do it that way as well. But on our wax melter, we simply take the insert and set it on top, and I set it on top of 4. You may find a better way. We tried setting it in the side, but it falls in. But we just set it on top, and I just simply came in with my crayon. I'm using Dandelion, and we ran that across the top there. And we're just going to take our texture brush and pop right into that Crayola and start to pounce the color right onto our gourd. Now the more crayon you use, the thicker your texture gets, and we do want to come back when it stops doing a lot of texture and add some more crayon right on top. Now this is hot, so be careful. I think we need to scoot him above one container here. There we go. And we're starting with our lightest of our colors. I like to use just one texture brush for each color and keep them that way, and I don't have to worry about cleaning them. But if you're going to use one, start with your lightest color, and we'll kind of melt it out and go back and forth cleaning it and showing you how to do that. But we want to add a third of we're going to leave a third of the small trees, and we're going to leave about half of our big trees, but we still want to get these branches that are down in there as well. And we want enough texture on it that you cannot see through your trees. So that's the reason that we created this, is because the trees did not look full enough. You could see through them, and we wanted that texture and layer built up so that it looked more like a real tree, and that's why I created the texture brush. And I am coming out with a tree book. It's going to be an ebook, meaning it's on your computer. You would look it up. You're not going to get a hard copy. And just make sure you check that out and see all the different ways we tell you to do trees. It talks about background, colors, how to do them, how to make a tree stand out, different ways to do liner work, different ways to line them. There's all kinds of fun things and basics to teach you so you could do any type of tree basically. And I'm just going to go ahead and finish my texture up till I like the amount I have. I'll keep adding crayon to it and just building on that, and then we'll talk about our next color. So I've gone in and done as much as dandelion texture as I want, maybe a little bit more up at this top part. And I really do like working with the circular melting pot better to put my texture brush into. As inexpensive as they are, it'd be a nice thing to have instead of trying to fight the insert on the other side. But I want to be able to show you how to use it. If you need to do it that way, that's fine. So we're going to take our insert now, and we're going to lift it off. Make sure you lift it off with your paper towel because it is hot. And we're going to start cleaning our brush, kind of going back and forth, getting the dandelion color out. I'm going to use the dandelion again a little bit later in the video. We do have the just dandelion crayons because we knew they were being discontinued. So we did pick some of those up. So if you want that color instead of trying another color or messing with it, you can just do that. And you just melt the wax out. And like on this one, it would be easier to do that until you get it pretty clean. Now we're going into orange, so we're not going to worry about getting this spotless. And I am going to use see how that goes on, so easy. And we're not going to do as much. We're going to kind of hit it here and there and everywhere. If you see on this one, I've got it here and then there and a little bit in the trees and some if we have in the background. So not a lot like our yellow Aspen backgrounds, and that's all our little guys are going to be. So we want to make sure that we have those areas covered up good enough that they don't need leaves, they don't look like they need leaves. So any branches like up at the top where it's thicker, we want to go ahead and put some orange on that. Get that guy in there. Now I'm going to come over to here and I'm just going to go in the areas that I think are a little bit too naked with just the dandelion. You can always come back and add more dandelion if you feel that it needs it. Come back and do that. There is no right or wrong. And you can take that paper down on your crayon when you start to reach the paper part of the melted crayon. And like I said, I'm just going to hit this guy here and there. Okay, I think that's good. I think we've got it pretty well. And you can have a tree that's already lost its leaves. There is no right or wrong on that. So go ahead and put the orange on. We'll clean our brush and put our next color on. So we're going to do our grass here, and we're going to do the darker color first, and because we're doing a green, the dark color green, and then coming into the light green, it's okay to do that because we want the lighter green on top. That's how you would see that. Otherwise, you would lose all of that color. So we're going to start with just green. And we decided to make this easier on us that we're going to start carrying the circle melting pots at miriamjoy.com with some texture brushes so that it just makes your life easier and you're not messing with all of that. That's just getting out of hand. I had melted my wax out, my orange. We're going to go to our green, and I just want to test it to make sure we don't have too much orange in there, and that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and just start, and I'm just going to do this bottom area like we did in the other one, just the trees come up out of the grass. So we want to kind of see that. And I'm going to melt some more green here. And I'm going to do a little bit more than I normally would. I want this a little bit thicker. Be careful if you happen to be working in front of a fan, especially in summertime, or the winter if you're in front of the heater as it's blowing on you. That does affect your wax. So think about that when you're starting to work and start your gourd. Now while we've got this green, I'm going to go ahead and put some into my little pots because we want to use it for some of the liner work. I've got a little bit of liner work coming out there, and we want to do that again before we get that lighter color on, and while we're using this color, and it can start to melt. And I'd still want to keep a little bit of my crayon because I'm still melting back and forth on that. But we want to fill that up pretty good. And you could even kind of turn it to the side if you needed to kind of scoop that color up as you're working. And we're just finishing off that green. Don't want that too high on the trees, but I want the trees to look like they're coming out of the grass. That's kind of important. Now while that guy, go ahead and stop and do that part, and then we're going to clean our green out just back and forth. This will really make it easier to clean because you can just melt it just right down the middle like that. That's so much better. And we'll go to put our liner work